And we're live.
Very good. I'll call to order today's regular council meeting of the Township of Cavan, Monegan on this Monday, February 7th. Before we get started, though, I'd like to make a quick acknowledgement and congratulations to our very own Chief, Scott Gilbert, with the City Police, who has announced his retirement. And on behalf of council staff and all of our residents, we want to thank him very much for the time he served within our community and wish him all the best on his retirement. Looking to council, I'd ask for approval of today's agenda. Mover, Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
And Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. I'd ask that any members of council declare any pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof at this time or when the situation arises. Seeing none, we will now move into the declaration of appointment to office of Cavan Ward Councillor Bill Shaw. Madam Clerk, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden. It is with honor that I welcome William Shaw to read aloud the declaration of office, appointing him as the Cavan Ward Councillor for the remainder of the 2018-2020 term of council. Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
Okay. I, William Shaw, having been appointed to the office of Councillor for Cavan Ward in the municipality of Cavan, Monegan, do solemnly promise and to declare that I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best extent of my knowledge and ability. I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or any improper manner. I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I will be faithful and bear the true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And I make this solemn promise and declare conscientiously, believing it to be true and knowing that it is of the same force and effect as if made under oath.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Shaw. Just so you are aware, you were unanimously appointed from members of council, and we are very much looking forward to your participation as an active member of our council as we finish off this term. So welcome, Councillor Shaw.
And I thank you all for your support.
We will now move into our presentations. Item 6.1, Diana Key, DM Wills Associates for Community Improvement Plan Expansion. Madam Clerk.
Sorry, Mayor McFadden. Just give me one moment here. I do not see where she has joined us. Give me one moment.
I see one that's just coming up as Zoom 2. Is that what you're thinking? That's might be her?
Through you, Mayor McFadden.
Yeah, apparently it is.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
If somebody knows that, that makes me feel a lot better than just letting. Perfect.
She put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. I see that now. Thank you, Councillor Huntley. So I will rename her, and Diane has joined us.
Welcome, Diana. We'll call you Diana rather than Zoom 2. It's a little less personal.
Muted.
Oh, and you're
I have
muted.
asked
Sorry.
her to unmute as well.
Through your worship, I'm off to a great start here.
That's okay. It's a Monday, and we'll just wipe it clean and we'll hit the reset button. We're all good. Welcome, Diana.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here today. This is a long one, so I'm going to be brief on the slides where I need to and focus on the slides where discussion is required. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Diana Kay. I'm a senior planner with DM Wills Associate Limited, and we are located in Peterborough. And we are the consulting project manager assisting the township with the expanded community improvement plan project. Next slide, please. So today's presentation will provide an overview of the work that we've completed to date, and this is just an agenda, I guess, that sort of summarizes what I'll be talking about today. I'll give a brief overview of what a CIP is, the purpose of the project process, and where we are to date, a brief summary of our findings through our preliminary background review, and then our detailed background review, the community engagement that we encountered to date, and of course, we're going to really focus on the proposed CIP directions, recommendations. There's a lot of good information in there, and then next steps and questions. Next slide, please. So a CIP is a land use planning tool established under the Planning Act. CIPs offer an opportunity for the municipalities to assist local businesses with incentives that will encourage investment and revitalization in the community. There are various incentive programs to meet the needs of local businesses and participate in the CIP process. Typical funding is provided through grants, loans, or tax relief. Next slide, please. So currently there is only one CIP for the Millbrook downtown area, and in order to offer the same opportunities for all businesses within the township is looking to expand the plan township-wide. Next slide. So just a brief overview of the project process. There are three phases. Phase 1, which we completed, it included a review of the existing policy documents and information related to the existing Millbrook CIP. We formed and commenced meetings with the Technical Advisory Committee, also known as a TAC, and we prepared the background report. Our background report summarizes the success of the Millbrook CIP, documents existing conditions, and identifies any gaps in information in order to form recommendations for the expanding the CIP. So we're currently at the tail end of phase 2. It initiated our community consultation program and commenced our deep dive into the policy analysis. And from here, we have prepared the CIP directions report that outlines the recommendations on how to prepare the expanded CIP. So once the recommendations of the CIP and directions report are approved by council, we will then be able to move into phase 3, which is the final stage and the actual preparation of the draft CIP. And this will be presented as statutory public meeting for public input, and then we can create the final CIP for adoption. Next slide, please. So this, the next few slides will provide a brief overview of our background review and our summary of findings. Next slide, please. To prepare a CIP, a review of the legislative and policy documents is necessary. The legislative framework, so the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, provides rules in which a municipality must follow when preparing any policy document, and this includes a CIP. The local policy documents provide guidance with respect to preparing the policies for the CIP. So the picture on the right just shows some of the policy documents we reviewed in support of the proposed CIP, but the background report goes into detail of all of the reports that we reviewed and the information we gathered from those reports. Next slide, please. Excuse me. In addition to the legislative and policy documents, additional background information was collected through on-the-ground research. So our team completed a driving tour of the township. As you can tell by the pictures, it was a very beautiful day, lots of blue skies, to document the type and location of existing businesses within the Millbrook settlement area, the hamlet areas, and the rural areas. So documented businesses included your typical highway commercial uses such as gas stations, automotive repair shops, trade services like plumbing and outdoor storage. There were also recreational opportunities such as the slots and golf courses. The hamlet areas were developed with convenience stores, administrative offices, and gas stations. I will note that the picture that says Fraserville, we know that's on OSM side, but it does give you kind of an idea of the typical type of uses that you're seeing as you're driving down the highway. So, you know, other than the recreational opportunities, it's your typical type of commercial uses. And our team also used information that was obtained from census and business directory data. Next slide, please. So the next few slides will provide a summary of the key findings, which includes a review of the success of the existing CIP, the business composition within the township, availability of employment lands within the township, and any amendments that are going to be required to the existing CIP bylaw and any official plan policies that may need to be amended in order to expand the plan. Next slide, please. So the Millbrook CIP came into effect in 2018, and it provides 9 funding programs available only to the downtown area of Millbrook. The following slides will illustrate the success of the CIP over the past 3 years. Next slide, please. In the first year of implementation, a budget of $60,000 was allocated by council for the CIP programs. 3 of the 9 programs were open, and those were the facade and signage improvement program, building and site improvement grant, and the sidewalk cafe grant. The township received 15 applications and 13 were deemed complete against the CIP criteria. So year 1 generated a great in total community investment of over $400,000. Next slide, please. In year 2, I will put the disclaimer out there that it did have an impact with respect to the pandemic that was going on. So in year 2, there was a much smaller budget allocated of $25,000. So that's $35,000 less than in the first year, but all 9 programs were now open. And the program intake was also less than year 1, where there was only 5 applications received and deemed complete. And it generated a total community investment of over $60,000. So still really good return on investment there. Next slide. In 2021, the same budget of $25,000 was allocated by council, and again, all 9 programs were open. Last year's intake was better than the previous year with 8 applications, and these applications are currently being reviewed for approval. Applications being considered include building and sign improvement, facade and signage, and sidewalk patio grants, so similar to the ones that were applied for in the previous years. Next slide, please. So the information identified on this slide was gathered from the township's business directory, Statistics Canada, the Canadian Business Counts, and the businesses registered with Census Subdivision of Cavan Monegan. So the graph illustrates the diversity of business sectors across the township. There's quite a few, and it also illustrates as a percentage the type of businesses within the township. So just to give you a brief overview, construction accounts for the highest number of businesses at approximately 21%. Other services account for approximately 14%, and other services is defined as personal service shops, so hairdressers, barbers, automotive services, electronic repair, pet care services, or dry cleaning establishments. So uses like that. And then that follows by retail with approximately 10%, and then healthcare and social assistance at 9%. So in order to get the full detail and breakdown, our reporting does provide that information. It also provides a breakdown in number of businesses with employees. And again, construction is leading that with the highest in terms of number of businesses with employees, followed by other services, retail, trade, and healthcare services. Next slide, please. It has also been identified that majority of businesses are actually located outside of Millbrook proper, accounting for 84% of local businesses. So there's lots of opportunity here for funding to support businesses outside of Millbrook proper. Next slide, please. So in order to understand the available lands within the township, one of the background studies we reviewed was the growth management study that was completed by Watson and Associates in 2020. And through that study, it shows that there is 589 net hectares of designated employment lands available in the township. And of that 589, 186 net hectares of that is currently vacant, so approximately 32%. I'm going to break it down even further than what is in this slide. So 160 net hectares of vacant employment lands are in the rural area, and 26 net hectares of vacant employment lands are in Millbrook proper. What's interesting is the report goes on to say that while it appears that there are greater vacancies in the rural area, it actually breaks it down by designation. So the amount of vacant urban employment area in Millbrook accounts for 88% vacancies, while the vacant rural employment in the rural areas accounts for 29%. So there's still lots of work to do in both areas with respect to bringing in more businesses and using up those vacant lands. Additionally, while there are still vacant lands available, we acknowledge through our review and in discussion with municipal staff that even though there is a great number of existing employment designated lands in the rural areas, they are hindered by lack of servicing and natural heritage features. A lot of these properties have environmental protection designations on them, and that really limits the developability of those properties. Next slide, please. So from a policy and program perspective, there are several existing CIP programs that can be expanded and offered as incentives to businesses outside of the current CIP area. However, additional programs will be required in order to better reflect the diversity of those businesses beyond the downtown core. Currently, Cavan Monegan's official plan policies are specific to Millbrook, and so it needs some amendments prior to the implementation of the expanded CIP. And this is also the same for the CIP bylaw. They will require some amendments as well for the same reasons. Next slide, please. So the next few slides will go into the community engagement consultation. So what we were hearing back from the general public as well as business owners and the information and feedback we were receiving from TAC. Next slide, please. So to date, the project team released 2 surveys, one to the general public that speaks to the availability of community amenities and services in the community, and then one that was specific to local business owners, and that was to understand the local needs to support their businesses right across the township. So as you can see, we received a lot more responses from the general public than we did business owners, but to the business owners' defense, there are a lot more people who don't own businesses in the township than do. An open house was also hosted on November 24th, 2020. Attendance was low and it consisted of business owners in the Millbrook downtown area and members of the general public, but we did still receive a lot of great feedback from those participants, which we utilized and I'll speak to that in the upcoming slides. Public consultation feedback was collected, and this was also reviewed against the feedback we received from the business community as well as the TAC, and we have organized that feedback into common themes so that way we can identify the needs within the community. Next slide, please. So this chart documents the feedback from local residents, business owners, and tax. And the tax, sorry. We put them into 3 columns just so you can see generally what we heard back. And everything in bold shows the common themes amongst those stakeholders. If you go to the next slide, please, I just summarized them for ease of reference. So that includes looking for opportunities for economic development, lack really thereof availability of infrastructure. The feedback that we got with respect to infrastructure from the public, it was mainly internet, which I know is already an issue that Cavan Monegan is dealing with. But from business owners, it was a lack of 3-phase power. So they're looking for that opportunity in order to support their businesses. Increase in access and to a variety of amenities, environmental stewardship, as well as business and employment growth. Next slide, please. So based on our background review and the feedback that we received to date, we then prepared the following CIP recommendations. Next slide, please. So based on that feedback and the very lengthy and great discussions that we had with TAC, the approach that we have recommended moving forward is to create 2 new CIP areas for a total of C3IP areas. So you'll maintain the existing downtown, create an urban fringe area as a second CIP area, and that will comprise of the balance of the urban settlement boundary of Millbrook. And then the third would be the rural area. So that would comprise the lands between the Millbrook settlement area to the township boundaries. And we're also recommending expanding the existing CIP programs where appropriate and applicable to the proposed new CIP areas, add new CIP programs that relate to a more diverse range of businesses that exist in the township and not just within the downtown core, and then implement the CIP through a program-based approach, which we'll discuss in upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So just for further clarity, this map illustrates the existing and proposed CIP area. In the green, that is the existing CIP area in the Millbrook downtown. The hashed black lines, that illustrates the proposed urban fringe area. And then in beige, that is the proposed rural area. Next slide, please. And this is just to bring it in a little further. So you can see here that the CIP that currently exists in Millbrook It includes businesses that are predominantly along King Street. And so then the proposed urban fringe area will capture the balance of businesses that are located within the village of Millbrook, but not within the downtown area. And the reason for this, and we defined it this way, is so that way we could capture the different business typologies located in these different areas. One, because they're very different, and two, for ease of interpretation and implementation later, because we have to remember that once we create these plans, staff have to implement them and council has to make a decision. So we want to make sure that we can interpret the information as easily as possible. Next slide, please. So this chart shows all the existing CIP programs and the potential to expand these programs to the proposed 2 new CIP areas. As you can see, the majority of them can transfer over, save and except the downtown rental and housing grant that is specific to a downtown. The bold programs identify programs based on business owner responses. So there are businesses that appear to want opportunity to convert existing buildings or expand onto their existing buildings in support of their growing businesses. There's a need for more appropriately designated lands that are not highly constrained, that can either be redesignated or rezoned to find opportunities for their existing or new businesses. And that way it can better serve the purpose of their business, especially if it's growing. So these are some of the identified programs that would help those business owners. Next slide, please. So in order to capture the diversity of businesses identified earlier in this presentation and based on the stakeholder consultation feedback, additional programs are listed in this slide and have been recommended to address additional business needs. Again, these programs are detailed in the CIP report. I'm not going to go through them in detail here. However, again, we did provide the appropriate sector in which these CIP programs can apply. So the majority of the programs, save and except the Rural and Agricultural Economic Development Grant, are applicable to all 3 areas. In addition, there was some discussion with respect to the existing redevelopment and adaptive reuse grant being similar to the vacant lands tax assistant program. So the way our project team reviewed these 2 programs, the difference is the redevelopment and adaptive reuse grant applies to properties that have existing development on them. So people with vacant properties won't be able to utilize that grant in the same way as they could with the vacant lands tax grant. And we thought it was a good opportunity to implement this program, considering it would be a focus on the option to help develop the 32% vacant employment land sitting in the township to date. Again, the bolded programs identify programs based on owner responses. So we've highlighted those to demonstrate that we've heard feedback from the business community that they're looking for stuff like this. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time on this because this was a big discussion, but an important discussion to have because it really dealt with how can the municipality implement this plan in the short term and in the long term. So it was a key factor in our review for the expanded plan. And so as we know, the intent of the CIP project is to expand the plan to include all businesses across the township and to allow for that equitable opportunity to access funding. So the key issue here was how do we do that in the short term and in the long term? So in the short term, allow a chance for those who are not eligible over the past 3 years to have an immediate chance to access the funding. And in the long term, how do we maintain equitable access? So the plan needs to be structured yet flexible. So currently the township CIP is only available to the businesses in downtown Millbrook. And given that the majority of the businesses, as we found out, are located outside of Millbrook and do not qualify to apply for the CIP programs, we understand there is a need and a desire to offer this opportunity to those businesses immediately. So our team prepared a review and evaluation of 3 different program implementation options, and they're outlined in the chart. So what I'm going to do is review the options and then apply them against the criteria, just to give you some background on how we got here. So option 1 is geographic area. Through this option, the CIP programs will only be available to certain CIP areas in alternating years, and that would be at the direction of council. So you will decide which CIP, is it 1, is it 2, will be open for application, and then the other CIP areas will be available for eligibility in the coming years, and then they'll just alternate. So option 2, it's geographic area and sector specific programs. So it's the same as the first option. However, it would kind of compound the issue where you would have alternating opportunities for each area, but you're only opening certain programs that are specific to the sectors located within that CIP area. And then option 3 is program based. And this is what's happening right now in Millbrook. So it means that all programs are available and anyone can apply. So any business can apply for any program in any given year. It's open year round, open every year as opposed to only open to certain geographical areas. So we reviewed those options against the criteria. The criteria is budget, program availability, meaning how many programs are available in any given year. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's all 9. The program type, what type of program is available, and that would be important to know regarding the type of business sectors in each CIP area, and then the potential business sector update. So I'm going to review the program availability and program type together for ease of reference because they are quite similar. So against the budget, options 1 and 2 came out somewhat limited. Budget is only available to the businesses located in the CIP area open for eligibility. And for option 2, only certain programs will be open for eligibility. So certain businesses and potentially certain sectors based on the selected programs have the opportunity to apply. So you would think that, you know, there's a lot more money available because there are fewer businesses that this opportunity is being open to. However, you got to be careful because the budget can be limited depending on the number of applications you receive. So even though it's only for a certain geographic area, you might get a lot of applications. So while it's open to fewer businesses, the township may still receive and approve a lot of applications, which limits the amount of funding each applicant gets. Through option 3, this is limited. So all programs are available and therefore you may see funding requests that exceeds availability. And similar to the above, depending on the number of approved applications, you may see even smaller amounts of funding being allocated as they get spread out to applicants. Now, the disclaimer here is that none of these options are proposing or will require an increase in the allocated budget by council. Once council sets that budget, that's all the funding that's available. What we do expect, though, is that the result of this is with more opportunity and access to programs, this will yield more quality and competitive applications for approval. So we understand currently the township is experiencing some low quality applications, so this should help improve that issue. With respect to program availability and type, option 1 is limited. Each CIP area is generally characterized by a specific typology of business. So therefore, in the short term, only certain programs will be of interest or used by the businesses in the CIP area in effect. And as a result, some programs may remain underutilized during that year, where other businesses in other CIP areas may have benefited, but they can't apply for it because it's not their year. Option 2 is similar to option 1, but even more compounded by the fact that certain programs will be available or expected to be available based on the type of businesses in that CIP area. So we want to be careful because we don't want to presuppose situations or programs that businesses may require from one year to the next, especially because they're not eligible to apply year after year. Option 3 is unlimited, as all programs will be available and the market and demand by local businesses will determine the type of program they need. So what's great about this option 2 is that it's data generating. So the municipality on the short term has the opportunity to document the most and least used programs for future consideration and decide if any amendments or refinements are required to the program list. With respect to potential business sector uptake, in options 1 and 2, they're limited because only the businesses that are located in the CIP area are eligible, and some businesses in the CIP area may not apply, which is a missed opportunity for businesses in other CIP areas, which currently need the opportunity but can't apply for it. Option 3 is somewhat limited. Again, implementation is driven by the market and not location, but all sectors have an opportunity to apply from one year to the next. So this option may lead to limited available funds to an applicant based on the number of approved applications. So as part of this option, the application evaluation criteria will play a key role in identifying which application should be approved or rejected in this scenario. So that way the municipality continues to maintain that equitable distribution. So based on this matrix, the preferred option is option 3 because it has the least amount of limiting factors. There's a variety of programs that are available. It's driven by the business sector and their needs. It's inclusive of all markets, and there's an increased chance of program uptake. However, with that said, we do want to acknowledge that the intent of the expanded CIP was to allow for businesses outside of downtown to access programs. So to ensure that we're providing this opportunity, because at the day, option 3 could still inadvertently limit successful applications by geography simply based on who's applying for them and what's approved. So in our review, we understood the need and importance to create a flexible plan that provides room for the CIP committee and council to make the best choice in any given year based on the CIP demands and the market needs. So to achieve this, we've recommended 3 CIP areas to allow for the opportunity to activate any CIP area and or program if needed. We recommended a broad selection of programs to meet a variety of business sector needs that can be pared down where there may be a specific interest or need to boost certain economic opportunities within a given year, and that these can change with the market and demand. So while the expanded CIP will be one document, it can be implemented for all 3 areas concurrently or separately as council sees fit. There's also a recommendation within the directions report if council chooses to activate the CIP, the expanded CIP, to just the urban fringe area and rural areas only in year 1 of its implementation to offer opportunities to businesses who are now eligible to apply for the first time because they haven't been able to do that since. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of the recommendations. We're proposing to expand the CIP area to include the balance of the township. To do this by providing 3 CIP areas, 1 maintaining the downtown area, creating an urban fringe area, and a 3rd, the rural area. We're looking to recommend and propose more CIP programs to reach a broader business sector, and the program-based approach is recommended in the long term, but in the short term, the CIP can only be available to those who have not been eligible to date. Next slide, please. So this just speaks to monitoring and marketing. A review and update where necessary will occur. So the monitoring marketing strategy of the CIP will need to include the expanded CIP areas and establish a new baseline. And the municipality will have to document this process and progress so that way they have enough information to understand the success of the programs and if any amendments are required in the future. So that's going to happen in detail through the draft CIP itself. Next slide. So at this point, we're looking for endorsement from council on the recommendations in the draft CIP directions report. A final report will be prepared with any necessary revisions, and from there we can start drafting the actual plan. Next slide. So this is just some information with respect to stakeholder engagement. All the information is available on Kevin Monegan's website, and we encourage you to look at it or contact Bridget or myself if you have any questions. Next slide. That is it. Any questions from anyone?
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Key. Questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Graham.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thanks for the presentation, Diana, and all the work that's gone into it. We have had a number of lengthy conversations about the composition and the structure and how to move forward, and I really appreciate the effort and the thoughtfulness that went into hearing those concerns, and also the effort that was taken to sort of try to wrestle out some more engagement along the way, as that's always an issue that we face. And I thought that, you know, I know it was a lot of work, and I really appreciate the effort of you and your team. I'm glad we've come this far and are still have a little ways to go, but I'm very happy about the adaptability and the ability to to isolate the opportunity and pursue the equity of the availability of the program in year one. It wasn't my initial thought, but I've been convinced, and I think that the adaptability and the learning that we can garner from that first year is going to help us make sure that the program is successful moving forward, and we find out the most strategic way to equitably move forward with the CIP program that all the businesses in our township can benefit from. So I just want to say thank you for all the hard work, and look forward to moving forward.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, I just want to echo Deputy Mayor Graham's sentiments. It was a lot of work, and we had to put up with he and I tossing it back and forth a few times. And I think you've come to a really good compromise between us, and saved council our hours of debate.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Further questions from members of council? If none, thank you very much, Ms. Key. We will we'll have further discussion later, and keep up the great work, as you've already heard from the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Huntley. Thank you. It's been a lot of work that's gone into this, and time and effort. So thank you. I get a motion then to receive.
Mayor McFadden. Sorry to interrupt you. It looked like Councillor Shaw had his hand up there
Oh,
momentarily.
my apologies. White background. Go ahead, Councillor Shaw.
I'm just wondering, is there a residential, say, affordable housing aspect to the CIP? I hadn't noticed it in there. Mostly it seemed to be commercial and industrial.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, there is a secondary suite opportunity. There is a program in there. So hopefully that gets utilized. The province is initiating opportunities, of course, right now for affordable housing for secondary additional dwelling residential units, I guess we should be calling them. Just being careful between the language of affordable and attainable, you know, to make sure that we make that distinction. But yes, affordability is definitely a provincial interest, a municipal interest. We are pushing that forward. So there are some programs that will be available to help business owners with that opportunity.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Well answered.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any further questions? My apologies, Councillor Shaw. I didn't see your hand. Anything, Councillor Huntley, go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I guess more a comment than a question. I guess it was under the monitoring section. You don't have to flip there, but one of the the kickoff from the original CIP program, as well as the ability for us to do this kind of study, all came from red funding, and provincial funding. And I think, it's kind of important that, we keep our eyes open for those opportunities as well. Like, there is definitely a financial investment that comes in from the township, but there's also a fair chunk of investment that's, quite possible that comes out of the province. So I think we will just make sure under that monitoring section that we highlight the fact that, that there is other sources of financial incentive here.
Yes, through. Can I respond?
Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, through your worship. Councillor Huntley, that is a great point. I've documented that. Absolutely. We'll include that as part of the monitoring process.
Thank you.
Very good. Deputy Mayor Graham, go ahead.
Well, through you, Mayor, I just wanted to thank Bridget as well for all the work that she's done and facilitating this, and also managing Councillor Huntley and my conversations about this project. She deserves an honorable mention as well. So thanks, Bridget.
Yes, she does.
Very good. Just a question of clarification on the last response as it relates to the secondary suites and the tie back to affordable versus attainable housing. Would that be open strictly for commercial purposes, businesses, or is this a residential opportunity on the residential side? Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Key.
For you, Mr. Mayor, it is a residential opportunity.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Graham, did I see a hand? Another hand?
Yeah, just through you, Mayor, just to elaborate on that, there are a number of programs that are going to be continually vetted and decided on as we move forward. There are a couple of the areas that were more about the residential facing that are in conversation to be included, are things like, even accessibility renovations. as well as secondary suites because that's been something that we've discussed as a council with ensuring that that inventory is available. So there's a hybrid of those sorts of programs that are going to address and pursue establishing more of an inventory and supporting those sorts of renovations, more of a residential offering than a commercial. So that's it.
Wow, very good. Excellent. All right, any further questions from members of council? If not, I'll entertain a motion then to receive that presentation. Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Shaw. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you very much, Ms. Key. Our next item is 6.2, Carla Buckborough and Glenn Spurl with the Cavan Monegan Library budget. Welcome, Glenn and Carla. Madam Clerk, I know you'll move them in. Welcome, Carla, and welcome, Glenn.
I think I've pressed all the right buttons.
We can see you and hear you both.
Finally. So we don't want to take up too much of your time. I will pass it over to Carla after just a couple of brief introductory remarks. So Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor and councillors, and welcome to our new councillor, Mr. Shaw. I hope we get to know you in the libraries, especially the Bruce Johnston branch in your ward. So as you know, when we appeared before you on the 20th of January, you asked for extra information, and so we are here to deliver that. But also since then, we have welcomed the mayor onto as the representative from council onto our board, and we had a meeting on, I think, the 25th of February to prepare for this presentation, and Scott was very helpful in that meeting. That's all from me, and I pass over to Carla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spurl. Welcome, Ms. Buckborough.
So we were asked to come back. I have to admit, I'm still a little unclear on what we were supposed to be presenting on. So I've put together some facts and figures. Hopefully this fulfills what we were being asked for. Otherwise, we'll have to try this again. Can you move to the next slide, please? So as Glenn mentioned, on January 25th, the board had a special meeting because our January 20th meeting had run long. Mayor McFadden joined us for this meeting, and we had, amongst the board members, quite an interesting conversation. We are reducing our capital request by $5,900. We were going to use that to purchase new computers for the public, but because of still restrictions with COVID and such, we are choosing to not do that this year. And I identified $491 for DVDs from prior year rollovers that we will be using against this year's budget. And we have one staff member who has to be offered and then declined OMERS. And so our operating budget will be reduced by $1,500. Next slide, please. So then this is just a summary showing the reduction, our first draft to second draft, for a total of almost $8,000 reduction to the levy requests. Next slide. We have two operating reserves. The working fund reserve, which the board talked about at length. We are going to retain that at the moment to be used to offset potential expenses resulting from the SHARP report. And we have a donation reserve, which the board is choosing to, or it is for the discretion of the board to use. And currently they have identified it to be used as a contingency fund for our ICIP funding application. The application was done in 2019, therefore the costings are different. Plus, if we need some soft items, chairs, movable things that aren't included in the grant, this can help offset those costs. Next slide, please. So our capital reserves, we have in collections $491. There was $220 from 2019. And this year, from what I can tell, $271 that was unspent in the DVD funds. We have an IT asset reserve, which is made of two pots of money, $6,000, which we asked for in 2019 for public computer purchases, and then a rollover of network devices that I'd planned to buy last year in 2021 and didn't plan to buy this year in 2022. The third capital reserve we have is for the ICIP. We need 26.6% of the total funding. This money is going to be used to rejuvenate the Bruce Johnston branch, including carpet, paint, new shelving, an AODA compliant circulation counter, and workstations for the staff. Next slide. So during our 2019 budget process, the library board brought forward a 10+ year capital forecast, which is what we have been using to form our capital budget request going forward. In 2021, as I've noted on this slide, we received 0 capital levy towards the book purchases. We had planned to ask for 29,000. So then this year we're asking for the same amount. We didn't increase it from our 2021 request. So this is what we've been using to guide what we ask for in our capital requests. Next slide, please. We were asked by Deputy Mayor Graham what we got for our money. He had specifically identified DVDs. In this case, I usually talk circulating materials as a general. So I just thought it'd be interesting to itemize. In 2019, we spent $31,000. We bought 1,900 items, which came out at a cost of $1,643. You can see in 2021, our budget was much reduced, 12,000. We bought 800 items at a cost of $13. The Canadian Library Purchasing Power Guideline that comes out from the Library Services Centre in Kitchener for 2021 lists a price of $26.97 as a typical purchasing price for library material, as a list price. We try to seek out the best deal we can, which is often through LSC, 40% off. We have other jobbers where we get percentages off, and we try to buy materials when they're on sale through chapters. So that's how come we're able to keep our costs down well below that list price average. The second chart shows our circulation. 2019, of course, was a normal year. So we had 38.5 thousand circulations of our physical items. So that's the actual books, DVDs and such within the library. And then we had 9,000 circulations in our virtual branch. In 2020, I was doing the math, and we did 1/3 or 1/4 of our circulation from January to the middle of March was over 9,000 items. We were on track from what I could tell to match 2019 circulations, and then the pandemic hit. Thankfully, I had asked council already for the budget to be able to increase our virtual branch and added in 2 more products, Hoopla and Canopy, which we were able to launch very successfully, even in the midst of the pandemic. And so you can see we had almost 15,000 loans through the virtual branch. 2021 was up and down because sometimes we were closed only for curbside, sometimes people could come in. So it was a real mix. So we had gains back in terms of the physical number of items that circulated. We saw a bit of a slow down, but yet still more use in the virtual branch. And so I think considering the 2 years we've had, to go from a circulation in 2019 of 47, almost 48,000 to almost 42,000 in 2021, I think that is very positive in terms of how libraries are used and how they were effective during the pandemic. Something that doesn't capture in our statistics were the wellness calls that we did out to patrons who we were concerned we might be their only point of contact. And that's a statistic that's hard to show anywhere. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that Mayor McFadden had asked was, how do we show how much we're spending on books or what we're getting in the capital levy is going towards books? So I created this slide that shows our budget request for books is $29,814. The third column shows the two sources of funding for that, the levy and the development charges. And then the same thing for DVDs, 5,500, and then the sources that's going to come from: levy, development charges, and the prior year rollovers. In our accounting system, I have two lines that are for book purchases and for DVDs. And so every purchase of those items gets put into the GL lines. When they add together, they should come close to this total of $35,314 that we ask for a total budget, $3,575 from the levy. Next slide. Our only other capital spending for this year will be the ICIP, on the assumption that the signed agreements come through at some point. That is, if you want to go to the next slide, I just have some, what I think are nice pictures of our beautiful spaces, just so that we can look at these while you have any questions.
Good. Anything further, Carla or Glenn, before I open it up for questions?
No.
No. Okay, very good. And Carla?
No, nothing for me.
That's all. Okay, very good. I've changed my screens around today, so I've got my presentation down low and my face up high. So when I'm looking up high, I am actually looking at your faces right now, not looking at the ceiling. So not to worry, I'm not rolling my eyes or fading off. I am with you. Councillor Huntley or Mayor Graham, Councillor Belch, Councillor Shaw, any questions for folks at the library today? Seeing none. All right, I would appear that you've answered the questions, Ms. Buckborough and Mr. Spurl. Thank you. And it was a sincere pleasure to be part of your board meeting and to participate in the discussion. So thank you. You had a very welcoming board. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion then to receive that presentation? Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Shaw. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
And Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Thank you very much. We'll move now on to our next presentation. Item 6.3, Dan Moring from Orca CIO Secretary Treasurer. Oh, Madam Clerk, I'll leave it for you to send people out and bring people in. Welcome, Dan.
Good afternoon.
The floor is yours. Did you want to start, or did you just want to open it straight up for questions? Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks very much. I don't have a presentation for you. It's a verbal presentation, but thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here today at the request of council. You've asked for an update from Orca on a handful of things. One is just how we're handling our commenting role. The other is what's our status on implementing the Conservation Ontario Client Service and Streamlining Initiative. And the last is what's the status of our reporting of permits issued. So I'll just work through those three, and I'd be pleased to take questions at the end, Your Worship. Just a little context. So all of you probably already understand that ORC is a commenting body or a public body under the Planning Act, and as such, we're provided with all Planning Act applications, and we have the opportunity to comment on them. We look through these applications through 5 lenses. We look at them, first of all, as a delegated authority by the province to represent the province on natural hazard matters. We look at it for conformance with the Trent Source Protection Plans, which are issued. This one is issued under the Clean Water Act. We look at it as a best management practice to ensure that any impediments to issuing a permit from us down the road are adequately identified and dealt with up front in the Planning Act approvals. We look at it as a service provider to the municipalities. The municipalities have asked us to look and provide technical advice on how these applications conform with provincial policy and natural hazards, natural heritage. And finally, and really this is more by exception, we look at it as an adjacent landowner. So if an application is for a piece of property that's adjacent to our property, are there any implications to us? Our practice is to typically go through a technical review, and then we bring all the technical review comments together, and we have a standard template letter for providing comments. We try to organize our comments under the 5 lenses that we look at things through. As an improvement, we understand that sometimes some applications afford us the opportunity to provide a recommendation on conditions for approval, and when that is likely to occur, you can expect to see on a go-forward basis that those recommended conditions will be organized under the 5 lenses that we look at. With respect to the Conservation Ontario Client Service and Streamlining Initiative, a few years ago, Conservation Ontario developed an initiative to help work with the province to address the province's priority on the supply of housing. The initiative was endorsed by conservation authorities in 2019, and our board endorsed it as well. The initiative has a series of guidance documents, best management practices, and bulletins and checklists. And it's quite a substantive number of things that are part of that. And one of the things in there are some recommended timelines for responding to permit applications, and they're tighter timelines than what the provincial standard is. So in the first year of implementation, the CAs that were subject to major development pressures moved to be the early adopters. There's about 14 of those. Autonomy conservation is not one of those. But our board then asked us to proceed to implement the timeline standards for this past calendar year. Many of the other best practices and the like were already in place at autonomy conservation. So we began to do that and track those. We also worked on a customer service policy last year, and we also created an online inquiry tool, providing an opportunity for people to raise their questions and get quick answers to whether permits required or any other matter. And I can tell you that's been quite successful. We typically used to deal with anywhere from 600 to 700 600 to 700 inquiries, at least how we were able to track them. But with the online tool, we're able to track them better, and we were actually receiving more inquiries. This past year, we dealt with just under 1,400 inquiries. On the reporting side, we had been reporting internally to the board for a couple of years what our permit issue timelines were. And the board asked us to start to bring that out into a public forum. So annually, you will see the template that we provide Conservation Ontario. You'll see that on our website. Right now, there's a 2020 version. 21 version will be ready in the next few weeks. On a quarterly basis, when we report to our board with our financial and activity report, we also report to them the number of permits issued by the timeline standard. They're organized by municipality. They're not listed individually. There's an aggregate for each municipality, and you'll see on a quarterly basis the numbers for that quarter and the year-to-date numbers. So those are attached to our quarterly activity and financial reporting that's given to the board in April, August, October, and in a few weeks' time in February. Just some statistics for last year. At the Q3 report, which was in October, we were meeting the timelines 97% of the time. And in 2021, we processed 406 permits, which is about 100 more than we did in 2020. So I think hopefully I've answered the questions that were raised at council earlier, and please to take any questions, Your Worship.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Any questions from members of council? I wouldn't expect any from Councillor Huntley, who's now also, I understand, the chair of ORCA, so I'm sure he could certainly discuss some of the responses as well if council has questions. None thus far. I've got a few. Primarily, I guess from a board perspective and a council perspective, a lot of times issues come out of the communications or concerns amongst communication, because I can understand and respect that a majority of the communication takes place at a staff level, and for all intents and purposes, boards for the most part are kept out of the loop, as are members of council. And so I'm sure you can understand the frustration when things appear to get bogged down and we're not provided any sort of insight as to where these problems are. And when I inquire with my representative on the board and they're unable to get a response in a timely manner, it's somewhat concerning as a councillor when I've got a mandate to try and move forward as a high growth municipality to try and bring applications forward. So in light of some of the experiences that we've had thus far, is there something fundamentally that you're going to change within the organization to improve that level of communication so that I can have that opportunity to insight into my representative on the board to get a timely response back to council?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the first thing that'll probably aid this is your representative is my chair. Changes the relationship a little bit. I've tried to guard our members, our board members, where there's a permitting matter, and tried to protect their opportunity to sit on an executive committee and hear a permitting dispute. So sometimes there's some hesitancy on that. I'll respond to any requests from any board member and do the best I can. But sometimes there's just a delicate matter around permitting. So I don't know how else to answer you on that, Your Worship.
Okay, well, I guess my concern is just the openness and transparency, and we're covered with that in all aspects when it comes to members of council as we deal with the public and open sessions and all of that. But my concern is, if you're unable to tell a board member information on a sensitive matter because they may be involved in permitting, and I can understand that, you wouldn't want their ability to be fettered on making a decision. What's the workaround? Because quite frankly, there needs to be responses. Who ultimately is going to send the response back? Because I've got a job to do and I can't do it if I don't have the information. If the appropriate person isn't my member on the board, who is it?
My experience with other municipalities and other members of our board, and even other members of council who aren't on our board, is they'll hand it off to me and ask me to get in touch with the affected ratepayer. And I'd be pleased to do that.
Okay, and then the ratepayer contacts the members of council. How do we close the loop? Because usually by the time it gets to me, they're not very pleased and they've already met with an individual, or they've had the conversation, the director has no information. So it all comes down to ultimately communication and understanding it. How do we proceed?
Well, I can only tell you the examples where at work we have other situations where the board member says, here's the concern, can you get in touch? I get in touch and provide an answer. It may be acceptable, may not be acceptable to the ratepayer. I advise the member that I've talked to them, and just is generally what I've told them.
So is there any effective workaround for the solutions that when it's not working? I'm just looking for a resolve because you play a very vital role in the whole process of development. You're key to the process. You're key in the commenting. You're key to the peer review process. But at the end of the day, when things get stuck or things start going off the rails, they can go off the rails really badly. And I'm trying to prevent that moving forward because the last subdivision application certainly won't be the last one in this municipalities, and there's a lot more coming. And I'm looking for opportunities to more streamline and make happier players around the table from all aspects. And I'm looking for a resolve to that. And I'm really looking to you and your leadership or the chair of how we could effectively resolve those issues.
Well, I'll have to reflect on it. I've given you the answers today of where I've applied this elsewhere, and that seems to have mitigated the concerns elsewhere. So I'll have to reflect on your particulars.
Okay, very good. Just for the record, it didn't resolve it on Tower Hill North. It was definitely outstanding issues, and there's more coming. So maybe between yourself and the chair, you can resolve that of how we can move forward specifically on addressing issues of the communication back and forth so we can have effective communication on all sides. Next question was, Bill 226 was pushed out by the province for comment. Orca provided comment and the township provided comment. One of the comments that has been an ongoing concern of our township has been the lack of identifying the comments of which role they were when the comments were being made. And we made that comment. It came from a report in November 30th, 2020. And you provided a response back to the province and copied us, which clearly articulated that for the past decade, you had been clearly articulating the roles upon which each of the comments were being made. And maybe you can expand on where that comment came from.
In 2011, the province put out a plan review. It's called the CA Liaison Committee's chapter on plan review. And it laid out a series of best management practice, one of which was to try to organize our commenting letters around the lenses, as I called it earlier today, the lenses that, or the hats that we wear when reviewing that. So upon my arrival in 2014, my review of the planning letters, comment letters we were sending out seemed to conform with that general direction. And over time, sometimes that'll drift a bit, but so we re-looked at that basic structure of our letter, the template letter, and we made some tweaks to that last year. At this time, we connected with our municipalities, made some tweaks to that. So given that it was not a binding direction from the province, it was not legally underpinned, but it was characterized as best management practice. Based on what I saw upon my arrival a number of years ago, and what my staff were telling me, that we were generally following that. But we did take, after that exchange of correspondence a year ago, we did step back and say, okay, let's go back and check with people to see if it's meeting their needs and everything. And we made some tweaks and adjustments. So I'm not sure if I'm getting to the core of your question, but that's my understanding or recollection of the events over time. And today, that particular best management policy doesn't find its way in the legislation, nor does it find its way in the regulations that were recently passed. It continues to be a bit of a best management practice, and to be quite frank, of the 8-member municipalities in the county that we provide comments to, there's not 8 views plus 1 common view. There are 8 plus 1 different views on how we should structure our letters and what they find useful and not. So, we have a template that we try to work from that generally clarifies and helps people understand when we're commenting on a provincial policy matter versus a neighboring landowner versus the Drinking Water Clean Water Act. But each municipality has a little bit difference around how important that is to them and how they would like that letter structured. So we're trying to find the common ground amongst all that.
Very good, thank you. I guess my concern was, and having sat in this role, and I also sat on the Orca board for an entire term back in 2010 to 2014, I don't recall ever seeing role-based structure of a planning commenting. I do give you credit in that in this year you started, and I think it was all launched as part of the review of the conservation authorities in general. But I know internally even your staff had sent out notification at the end of January following your letter that they recognize the importance of providing role-based commenting on conservation authority letters, because quite frankly, there's a huge difference for an individual, whether it's a comment or a requirement, and the ambiguity can cost tens of thousands of dollars in differences in interpretations. And part of that is that if they're going to have to follow through, they really need to know up front. So congratulations on putting that information into the letter. Our point to the province in December was, quite frankly, those were not broken down as confirmed by your staff's letter at the end of January, and moving forward they are, and I commend you on that because that's what we were looking for. But that was where our comment came from, because it is something that's critical to the entire communication piece, is understanding what's required, what's not, and under what basis they're being made. So thank you. The last thing has to do with the Section 28 permits. And one of my concerns, as it is related to the reporting, is there anything going to be incorporated into the mechanism of your reporting that was going to identify not only the time that it takes to at the end to do your Section 28 permit, but the time up front under your service providers of your technical advice in meeting the terms and conditions for a Section 28. A simple example would be a subdivision where it might take a month to actually do the Section 28, but you've been 3 years, and I don't mean all on your clock, but the process has been 3 years to get through meeting all the terms and conditions of a Section 28. Is that going to be captured in your metrics?
So I think what you're referring to is our commenting role as a public body, and whether that's representing the provincial interest or whether it's acting as a service provider to municipalities. So that's a little hard for us to track because we're not the keepers of that process. Township is the keeper of, site plan controls and bylaws and the like, and I guess some OP amendments, and the county is the keeper of subdivisions and severances, and applications come out and we're given a deadline, and then for the easy ones, severances, we're given a deadline. We meet the deadline or don't meet the deadline. But on subdivisions, there's lots of back and forth. There's lots of occasions where the authority is not even in the loop on the conversation. There's a lot of conversations that are going on without us. So I find it hard. I'm not sure how to. I would say I have a very difficult time answering that question today. Now, part of the process we have to go through over the next couple of years is to review these service agreements with our municipal members. And if they want to introduce some sort of reporting around things that deal with our commenting role for them, then I think we can adopt that or adapt to that or deal with it. But it's not when you don't own the process, it's hard to track the process. That would be my comment back to you right now.
I guess the environmental peer review component, which would be what I'm making reference to as part of the county's planning process for subdivision approval, that peer review, unless I'm misunderstanding, is something that is owned by the Conservation Authority, providing the comments back to the county. So that's the component I'm asking to have the metrics associated to, and you do own that process because that's been delegated to the Conservation Authority.
And that'd be fine. We can deal with the county with that. The county uses us as a service provider. It's not technically a delegated responsibility. So under the terms of a service arrangement, if they want to put a service standard in there, then we would have to figure out what that is and adhere to it. So thank you.
Very good. And as we move forward towards those memorandums of understanding with the conservation authorities, obviously we'll have one as a lower tier directly for the services of the conservation authority. Where it can become problematic would be the higher level upper tier memorandum of understanding, recognizing the significant differences between each of the lower tiers. You've got a high growth municipality like Cavan Monegan, which is significantly different than the Trent Lakes and the North Kawarthas and those areas which are highly focused on lake-based tourism, et cetera, versus the agricultural business center on the Highway 115. So there's differences certainly upon needs and requirements. So moving ahead towards the upper tier memorandum of understanding, would you be supportive of doing a tri-party agreement? Would that be more reflective of the underlying lower tiers in those agreements? Because quite frankly, at this point, we are not served well by the upper tier memorandum of understanding. And quite frankly, it doesn't even go before county council for approval. It's all delegated to staff. And I think time is told it hasn't worked effectively. And we're certainly looking for an opportunity to collaboratively work together with the Conservation Authority, which I believe could be achieved through a tri-party agreement. And would that be something that the Conservation Authority would be supportive of?
Your worship, with respect, that's a tricky question. We have a one-to-one relationship with 2 single-tier municipalities and 6 lower-tier municipalities. We have a one-to-one relationship with the county. If the county is amenable to their relationship being more of a tripartite relationship, we would certainly follow that. But I think this is a conversation between the upper and lower tier municipalities to resolve, and not for me to really weigh in on that.
Very good. And I can appreciate that. I just, so you know, that these conversations with the upper tier, because it's a delegated authority to staff, it's simply delegated to staff. And quite frankly, I'll be blunt, it doesn't work for Cavan Monegan. And I really hope that moving forward, we can come to that understanding. And maybe with the chair that's representing our township, maybe we can have that conversation and ensure that all of the needs of each of the lower tier municipalities are met. And as you very well know, we're all very different. So I know it's not an easy task. I applaud you for your efforts. It's certainly, it's difficult dealing with all of these individual municipalities, which are so succinctly different. So enough with all the easy questions. Any other member of council have any tough ones for Dan today? Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair. I don't have a question for you today, Dan. I did want to say thank you for coming out today. I mean, it's great. And I do want to applaud you in how far you have brought Orca in the last, 8-9 years that you've been on a part of the Orca organization. The communication has obviously increased greatly, and a lot of the reporting structure is definitely, with the permits, has come out a lot more transparent. So I think you've done a lot of great things. So I don't want you to leave here with feeling browbeaten by the mayor here.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. It's only been 7 years, although it may feel like 9 years. Thank you.
Very good. Just a question, and either maybe Councillor Huntley knows or Dan, with regards to the permit in the individual section 28, you made reference to the metrics that are going to be used moving forward. Now that I'm the new member of the Kawartha Conservation, I attended my first meeting, and ironically, the very first thing I received, well, other than being nominated for the vice chair, the other thing I received was a stats on the section 28. And it's a graph that indicates the amount of time it takes to initially bring it in and process it and acknowledge, and then a second chart that identifies how long it took to complete. I found that I'm a visual person. I found that very effective, and I wondered, you may already have it. I did mention it to Councillor Huntley. You may already have it, or if not, maybe you're moving towards it, or you're flipping papers, so maybe you're about to show me.
Well, it'd be a little, thank you. It'd be a little difficult. We don't have something simple. Ours is not similar to the Kawartha. The Kawartha shows basically the timelines for each individual permit. Our board has asked us to simply aggregate by municipality, report on a quarterly basis, and a year to end. So I can tell you, for instance, that Cavan Monegan at the end of the third quarter last September, we received 10 permit applications. And that was out of a total of 235. And then the second side of this is we show our response time relative to the two standards, the provincial standards and the Conservation Ontario standards. And in that, we show the number of permits issued within the standard and the average number of days to issue a permit. We don't show it by each permit. So we have a little higher level summary. And the nature of that was, the board gave us the direction around how high to aggregate or how far to decompose. And so we've got it at that. But I am familiar with the Kawartha Conservation's reporting, and congratulations on being elected the vice chair.
Very good. So, Councillor Huntley, I guess my question is from a township's perspective, are you able to flag the outliers that are above the average? I know the average is great and that's wonderful for a majority of the applications, but those aren't the ones I hear about. It's the outliers that go over. So, Councillor Huntley, are you able within the mechanisms to be able to identify the outliers to bring them to our attention?
We used to get, and I don't know, Dan can correct me on this one, but we used to get the individual reports, but they were in a closed session because they were identifiable to individuals. And at that point, if there were outliers, and we were free to talk and ask questions about them. So I assume that practice is still going to continue. And so I do believe, yes. But I think what you're more on, though, Your Worship, is people who are complaining. So the outliers may not necessarily generate a complaint. They might just take time. But what you're looking for is when somebody comes knocking on your door, where's the answer for that? And I think that's where the process then becomes, having to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and if you've got that information enclosed, then I guess it would just be a matter of a board policy then to include that in a report that's going to identify the chart that I had showed you that clearly identifies the outliers on that relative to everything else with the permit ID. It assists in trying to move it forward with that open policy, openness and transparency to understand those outliers, as opposed to having to dig through closed session notes, which you may or may not necessarily have access to, because everything with Kawartha Conservation that I saw, I haven't gone into closed yet. So everything is open session relative to the permits, and they just keep back any of the personal identifiable information. Very good. Any further questions from other members of council? Seeing none. If not, thank you very much, Dan, for attending today. I appreciate your responses, and I can assure you we'll certainly be in touch, either directly or through your chair, Huntley.
Thank you.
Motion to receive that presentation. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Belch, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Once again, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
We're now just about to start into delegations, but before we do, we've been an hour and a half. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll resume immediately afterwards with our delegations. We have 2 of them. Very good. We got a clerk, we got quorum, but we'll give Matthew or Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Shaw a little bit longer here to reconnect. There we go. Councillor Shaw and Deputy Mayor Graham. Okay, Madam Clerk, you ready?
Mayor McFadden, yes, I am.
Very good. Excellent. Our next item is item 7.1, Beth and Scott McKinley working together for climate solutions. Madam Clerk, I'll let you let them in.
Through you, Mayor McFadden, the presentation does have sound in it, so we will be sharing it through a PowerPoint presentation. So just give us one moment here. We're just going to change screens.
Very good. And is it fine as
Scott,
part of the presentation, or do you need a motion?
No, it's part of the presentation.
Okay,
it's just the video wouldn't display in a PDF format. We had to show in PowerPoint.
It wouldn't
And I
print
do
out.
believe there's Beth and Scott.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very good. Welcome, Beth and Scott. I will turn it over to both of you to proceed. Go ahead.
Okay, so good afternoon, councillors, Mayor McFadden and Deputy Mayor Graham. My name is Scott McKinley, and this is.
I am Beth McKinley.
And as residents of Cavan Monegan, we would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. Now, congratulations, I guess, are in order for Councillor Shaw for being very recently appointed to the seat on council. And on the flip side of that, we would like to extend our condolences to council and to the Moore family for that seat becoming vacant in the first place. Next slide. We represent For Our Grandchildren, which is a Peterborough region-based group working together with citizens and governments to do three things: inform, inspire, and motivate climate action. To this end, we are asking council for the following. We would like to know your specific next steps towards implementing the Cavan Monegan Climate Action Plan. Number two, we would like you to network with other municipalities across Canada by assigning a representative to join the Climate Caucus and to enroll in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Climate Leadership course. And thirdly, we would like you to prioritize the implementation of whatever your next steps become in the Climate Action Plan. Next slide.
We asked high school students in the region why they want strong action on climate change from their governments. And Tiernan Ma, a local student from Cavan Township, offered to read a small selection of these responses. Next slide.
High school students from two different school boards, KPR and PVNC, were asked why they want strong action on climate change, and these were their responses. A grade 12 student said, "It is the most important problem we face. It is having irreversible consequences, and things will only get worse if we don't take strong action now. This is an emergency. We have to recognize the way we do everything, the economy, our social structure, basically everything, to avoid the worst impacts to climate change." Sierra, 14 years old, said, "I want to grow up in a world where I don't have to worry about climate change impacting my future." A grade 12 student said, "Young people like me are losing hope and living in fear. We need strong action from all levels of government. We need to see people like you who have power do more about climate change, because we have to suffer with negative effects of climate change our whole lives."
Next slide, please. It's not just young people that want strong climate action. These are the results of a poll done in 2021 by Abacus Data. The red bars, the dark red and light red bars, show us that over 75% of Canadians are extremely or very concerned about climate.
I like to include this cartoon because it underlines the many associated benefits of addressing climate change besides climate change itself.
We need the next slide so you can
Oh,
see
sorry.
that cartoon.
There it is.
So I don't know if you can read it. It says, "What if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing?" And then in blue, there's a list of the benefits.
Next slide, please. We recognize that Cavan Monegan adopted a climate change action plan in 2016 and has implemented its first 3 milestones and has proceeded with several additional initiatives. This represents a great start, but we would like to know your next steps as you continue to implement the climate change action plan. Next slide.
We would like to applaud several positive actions that Cavan Monegan has taken. These include incentives for building improvements in downtown Millbrook, supporting alternative energy, the community garden, the farmers market, and the organic waste system, encouraging bicycle use, and building the new trail from downtown to the new subdivision. These are all steps in the right direction. But as we move forward, even more will be required.
Next slide.
United Nations scientists say that in order to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees, we need to reduce emissions by 45% by the year 2030. That's 8 years from now. The world has already warmed by 1.1 degrees. And the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees is enormous in terms of the risks of drought, fire, flooding, damage to ecosystems, agriculture, and fisheries, impacts on human health, and economic costs. Given the seriousness of the challenges we face, we are here to ask you, what are your next steps in the implementation of the Cavan Monegan Climate Change Action Plan? Next slide, please.
For Our Grandchildren has built relationships and networked with many specialists in fields related to climate change. And we can share relevant resources and contacts to assist you in meeting your climate change action plan goals. Next slide. The Climate Change Action Plan encourages civic engagement around climate change with local key community organizations. So For Our Grandchildren may be able to offer ideas and assistance as you plan your next steps. We have a variety of platforms, including monthly online meets featuring climate-related specialists, a newsletter and webpage that provide climate actions, current news articles on climate change, and recordings of our past 4RG meets. And you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram.
Because you all look like the demographic that is on Instagram. We know that as a municipality, your mandate is limited. However, you do have influence on others, and we encourage you to support climate-friendly solutions such as regenerative farming, which has a huge impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions and sequestering carbon. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Home emissions is another area where council may be able to affect significant positive change by promoting home energy audits, encouraging the switch from fossil fuels to heat pumps, which, by the way, pay for themselves within 5 years, and promoting government incentives for home retrofits. Next slide, please.
For Our Grandchildren has developed a resource sheet which links to related programs and other climate-related initiatives, and we can forward that to council to assist with community climate education and the like. Next slide. Our second ask is that council selects a representative to join Canada's Climate Caucus. The Climate Change Action Plan encourages municipalities to network with other municipalities to achieve their emissions reduction targets. The Climate Caucus coordinates approximately 400 municipal representatives working together to share best practices for meeting the 2030 carbon emissions goals. They meet for about an hour to 2 hours each month, so it's not a huge group. Next slide, please.
There is a lot going on across Canada as municipalities recognize that 50% of Canada's emissions are influenced by municipal decisions. Many municipalities are sending representatives to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Climate Leadership course. We sent all of you the online registration information a few weeks ago because there was a deadline, but there will be another course coming up. The goal of this 7-hour course is to help elected officials share best practices so that you can apply a climate lens to your decision making.
Next slide.
Our third ask is that you prioritize the implementation of the Cavan Monegan Climate Change Action Plan. Listening to the words of our local teams again reminds us why it is so important that we get this right.
You can play that.
I want my grandkids to have a good life. Preserving green space and encouraging the use of greener energy are just two things we can do to fight climate change. I hope I can count on you to be part of the change for the better. A grade 10 student said, climate change is only going to get worse, but we have a choice right now to affect how bad it will get. A grade 12 student said, as a young person, I would like you to take strong action on climate change because I believe it is the greatest threat to the world right now. It affects everyone on the planet and will only continue to hurt people until it is dealt with. Stopping climate change is essential to ensuring a future to my generation and the generations after me. Climate change is going to affect people my age more than anyone else, and we currently do not have the power to do much about it on our own. I would like to see higher taxes on businesses that have high carbon emissions to encourage the use of green energy. I would like to see government subsidies used to help people transition to green energy and for energy conservation in their homes.
Next slide, please. So to summarize, our first ask is that you tell us about your specific next steps in implementing the Cavan Monegan Climate Change Action Plan. And please remember that for our grandchildren to provide resources and networking to support your work. Secondly, we are asking you to join the Climate Caucus and perhaps participate in the Climate Leadership course. And thirdly, to prioritize the implementation of your next steps in the Climate Action Plan.
We'd like to thank you for your time and for helping to make Cavan Monegan a great place to live.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Moving along here. Questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Graham.
Oh, through you, Mayor. Just wanted to make sure I was off mute there. Thank you for the delegation. Obviously, a very important and relevant topic, and it will be forever on our minds. I think our municipality, from the conversations I've had with other municipal representatives, it seems like years ago at the Roma conferences we used to attend in person and have very interesting conversations and exposure to different approaches and things of the like around how we can reduce our emissions. I wondered if it might be appropriate to ask Bridget to speak, if she had any comments in response to any of the matters or the questions posed to council at this time. This is within her portfolio.
Welcome, Ms.
Thank you.
Hyatt.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham, and through you, Mayor McFadden, to the For Our Grandchildren Committee. Thank you very much for coming and making this delegation. It's always great to have members of the community come and remind us how important this is. Our climate change action plan, we set the goal. First of all, it was a regional initiative that we participated in with the county, all of the 8 townships, 2 First Nations, and the city of Peterborough. And collectively, we set a goal to reduce our corporate GHG emissions corporately by 29% and a community by 31%. So we're a little under the 45, but I think that was when we made our initial calculations. That was the number that was arrived at across the board. I would like to say that there is a lot that we have done to actually implement our climate change action plan. The plan itself is split between corporate and community, and corporate being what we've done as a municipality. Community is what is going on in the community with which we live within. On the corporate side, we've done a lot to enhance our operational efficiency of our existing buildings. We've replaced lights with energy efficient alternatives. We look to build facilities to ensure high environmental performance. So the recent build of the CMCC was done to an LED standard, a LEED standard. Our official plan, we have a specific section, section 3.6, that speaks to energy conservation, and it requires that all buildings in excess of 600 square meters meet or exceed a LEED silver or better standard. And specifically section 3.15 defines council considerations for development of industrial, institutional, commercial, and multiple residential buildings, specifically related to LEED design. We've improved the environmental performance of our existing municipal facilities. So we've retrofitted exterior lighting downtown with LED alternatives. And my friend Wayne Hancock is very proud of that and would certainly probably like the opportunity to boast about that. Appliances within the CMCC are all Interstar rated. Renovation of the municipal office here, we saw upgrades to insulation, building envelope. We utilize renewable energy sources, Wayne's solar panels, again, very proud of those. We've also developed a tree preservation policy, was recently adopted by council. We've reduced the amount of organic waste generated through our municipal operations. So we have a waste diversion program, and we've developed mollusks at the transfer station. On the community side, we do find the community side is a bit challenging. Communications and education is kind of the key focus, but I would like to say that, you know, the pilot organics project in Millbrook is an initiative that we took on as part of our climate change action plan, as were the mollusks at the transfer station. To our existing Millbrook CIP, so I know you had talked about government incentives. We do have incentive programs available for adaptive reuse, building rehabilitation, and retrofit works, along with any repairs to infrastructure, roofing, windows, doors, that would enhance the energy efficiency of our buildings. Community buildings, I mean, houses and businesses. We have a requirement provision in our zoning bylaw that requires bicycle parking for retail, personal, institutional, industrial, public, and private school, and dwellings or mixed-use buildings with more than 6 dwelling units. So we require that anybody building such a facility has to provide for bicycle parking. We have a low-flow toilet rebate program. Again, I mentioned our tree replacement policy. One of the things collectively as a county, and I believe Peterborough County Council back in September of 2020 passed a motion to enter into a pilot partnership agreement with Peterborough Greenup. And the intent there was to have Peterborough Greenup support us in achieving the community targets as a collaborative that was established as part of the climate change action plans. We did form a community advisory group to assist Greenup and the county to implement and execute actions. I am actually part of that committee. Some of the things that we've done to date are more around a communication strategy. So from a residential climate action programming, we launched a series of home retrofit video series. On the business side, we did a Green Economy Peterborough, which is a great program for businesses to do energy audits and identify areas and or incentives that they might be able to take advantage of for upgrades. And then we did school climate action programming. So Peterborough Greenup developed a county school climate action guide. And are working with schools within the county to utilize it as part of their curriculum. So that kind of just gives you kind of a long-winded synopsis of where we're at.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Bridget. And Scott, sorry, just through you, Chair, just to follow up. Hit a lot of high notes there, and I think we all have a lot to be very proud of. To fill in a few things, least we forget the county's moving forward with the Clear Bags initiative and the reductions in the waste generation that we've seen between 30 to 40% throughout the county. Now that all members of the county have implemented their Clear Bags, I think as of January, Scott, if I'm not mistaken, I think the last one came online now. So all 8 municipalities within the county are currently on Clear Bags, and those that are later to the party will start to recognize that reduction as well. But also, you know, on the subject of regenerative farming, there's obviously very limited from a municipality as what sort of influence we can provide. But I would argue that we might be the most supportive of regenerative farming of any municipality, seeing that all of our leaf and yard waste, we have an agreement with Norm Lamont to utilize our leaf and yard waste produced throughout the township that we collect is provided to Norm to support his regenerative farming in that contract. So I don't know if there's much more we can do, but I know Bridge is on top of it and always aware of these different components. But it's definitely something that we're probably, as with other plans, when they're, you know, as with things like GHG emissions, there's evolving targets, evolving technologies, and always things to keep up on. So it might be something that we want to revisit maybe next year to talk about how we revisit this plan and see if it's to the modern standard with the targets in mind. And sort of, it's definitely something that we've had conversations, or I've had conversations internally with staff about better communicating our plans and what we're doing to provide for them, because there's a lot that we are doing. And I think a lot of even other townships in the county would benefit from exploring. And I know we, even with regards to the regenerative farming comment, we did invite Norm, and he did do a delegation to the county about that sort of process and technology, and talk about, you know, opportunities to potentially have a contract with them to receive some more additional leaf and yard waste from other municipalities as well. So there's definitely lots going on, but the communication and the summary and the I guess transparency with how we get all of these known to the general population and how they can hold us to the standards that we set for ourselves is something that is definitely on our mind, and something that we have had several conversations to work toward. And I know Bridget can elaborate on that.
Very good, Ms. Ayat.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. Just to add, I recently participated, and it's an ongoing series of webinars. But the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is partnering with Mars, Toronto, not the planet, but the actual Technology Innovation Center in Toronto. And they are hosting Climate Action Accelerator webinars. I had my first one on Wednesday. Really, really great exchange of information. It's an interactive workshop where you identify what you're essentially try to answer the questions that For Our Grandchildren is asking us. What's in your climate change action plan, and what are you doing to try and make it happen? And what are your barriers? How can we help you overcome those challenges? So it's been very enlightening. It's a great opportunity to network with other municipalities from across the country, not just across the province, to see what they're doing, identify their best practices. You know, I got a few tips with regards to transportation. Transportation has been kind of tricky for us because of where we are. We have a lot of need for car usage, obviously. So some great ideas as to how we might manage that. So we are constantly trying to educate ourselves to see if there's something we can further our contributions.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Ayat. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. And I will say, it's consistently left off the list, Ms. Ayat. We never mentioned the fact that the township has had single-ply toilet paper for close to a decade now. And I know it's a sticky subject. However, we are definitely leaders in that, and we certainly hear about it from all. So yes, it's those are the uncomfortable realities of sometimes the decisions that are made. But Scott and Beth, yeah. Further comments, questions?
Thanks for that quite an extensive list of things that you've been working on. Some of them we were familiar with, and some of them not so much. I guess I think well, both of you, Deputy Mayor Graham and Ms. Hyatt, touched on the communication aspect of it in terms of, not sharing, at least effectively, perhaps, with the community as to what your goals are and what you're achieving and what you're setting out. So I do think that is someplace that you've identified that you could work on, and in terms of trying to make that information more available and getting people to celebrate with you what you have been achieving. So that's a very good point. You had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if with the things that you've said that have been done, is that going to allow Cavan Monegan to meet the targets that were identified in the Climate Change Action Plan?
So through you, Mayor McFadden, to answer your question, that's also an area where we need to kind of pull up our socks in terms of monitoring, so we know exactly where we stand. So when I was listening to your presentation, that's why I'm always glad when organizations come forward, because it's a good opportunity for me to say, oh, I'm not doing that. So I know there are certain departments that are monitoring it as part of our energy management plan. But taking those numbers and comparing it to what's in our climate change action plan, I don't think that's something that we have done, but something that we can do going forward. But we do have a reporting structure through our energy management plan.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, that's good. Go ahead. I'm good.
Okay. I did have a kind of a side question. With all the development that's going on with some of the housing developments and whatnot, are there, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, or incentives or perhaps requirements in terms of new developments, in terms of meeting certain increased standards from what we've had in the past in terms of environmental efficiencies, whether they be heat pumps or solar panels or what have you.
Ms. Hyatt, I see our building official is not online. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we do follow the regulations of the building code. So if the building code, whatever is available in the building code, that is the standard we apply. We do have, as I had mentioned earlier, within our own zoning bylaw, we have certain requirements with regards to parking. I do see that our Director of Public Works has got his hand up. So Wayne, you might want to jump in.
I would call a friend, Ms. Hyatt. I saw Mr. Hancock's hand go up and I was about to turn it over to him. Go ahead, Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to add to what Bridget has already mentioned, we have a number of things that we're working on. There is, of course, certain things already set out in the building code, as she's mentioned, for the housing. But beyond that, we are dealing with issues like groundwater monitoring. We do that on a regular basis throughout the township. We have annual reports coming forward. We use what's referred to as LID. Those are water infiltration trenches to recharge the groundwater. That's a standard practice in our subdivisions. Our stormwater management ponds, of course, are, I would say, built to the highest degree of ministry criteria to ensure not only the limitation of solids, but also that water quality effluent meets the highest standards. And that generally there's practices that we're looking at, such as permeable asphalt. And to add to that, the monitoring that we try to follow up on is, while developments are being built, we try to certainly monitor the issue of quality of effluent for the sewage treatment plant, and of course water quality, which is our drinking water. So those are all parts of the sort of the equations that we do on the development side. which falls in with what's happening on the housing side, directed by the Ontario Building Code for the most part, but just to sort of add to some of the things that we are doing.
It's certainly something that goes into the discussion upon each of our directors, and I know our fire chief he's here as well today. He certainly spoke to it as well as it affects their department. I know there's been decisions that have been made relative to the jaws of life that are now all electric versus the ones that were running off of generators and the fossil fuels. So it is something that goes through each of the directors as they're making their decisions towards moving forward. I think what I find the most challenging and difficult is recognizing there's a lot out there that as a council we do not have control over per se. And you made suggestions on relative to houses all having to have the solar panels and that there's things, and we find it a wide range of those outside of just the climate change, but also you get into the whole affordable housing discussions and those requirements. So there's a lot of things we would like to do, and I'm certainly not one to try and pass the buck, but there's also things that are outside of our abilities to mandate and require. And sometimes those things that are within our ability to control and require aren't always necessarily the most popular ones to bring forward, and we can take a lot of slack for them. But I can assure you we're certainly doing our best in trying to move forward. We're very innovative. We're certainly open to ideas. Myself personally, I prefer to be action oriented, as you'll see with this council, as opposed to sitting on more committees and talking about it. We do it. And quite frankly, we didn't require studies to move to a green waste program. We don't require studies to change our fleet and our jaws of life. We don't require consultants to tell us that. Those are initiatives that this council does on their own, and I'm very proud of it. So if you have low-lying fruits of items of which we can certainly consider to move forward with and whatnot, by all means, please encourage it, bring it forward. It's certainly something we consider. And Deputy Mayor Graham, you've been very patient as I've gone on my long-winded rant, and the floor is
No, not at all. I was just going to add to that. I mean, I think, and there's been, I know from the like I stated before, the various conferences and things that we previously were able to attend and things of that nature. At the end of the day, though, I mean, when it comes to the housing construction, I mean, we can't exceed the building code standards legally. I mean, we're bound, but there's been some recent advancements with the building code, like for instance, the inclusion of at least the infrastructure to allow for a plug for electric vehicles is now standard. So that will be moving forward in future housing developments, a requirement of the building code, and we're obviously in great support of that. And the rest of the infrastructure has to follow along too. But those are the sorts of things where, I think it's a jurisdictional comment. There are things that we can't legally exceed when it comes to that, even if we have opinions and ideas. And I think the biggest hurdle that I've learned from the past 3.5 or so years is really how limited we are in our ability to influence, but also the fact that a lot of the legislation that is built around the conditions and parameters that we work within are just not built to address or identify the issues or circumstances of rural municipalities. Whether it's the Golden Horseshoe or the PPS, a lot of these are not rural community centric documents and don't lend themselves to any sort of flexibility or reflection of those realities. And, I know the county submitted multiple letters and the township has as well about being removed from the growth plan. And, we haven't been successful in those things, but, all we can do is ask and continue to fight the good fight. But that's just, it's a bit of a gloomy reality, but it's nice to see that things like the evolution and increased climate conscious, let's call them, elements of the building code are continuing to being updated, and we'll, like I said, we'll have to continue to keep pace.
very good. Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Belch.
You're muted, Tim.
No, I'm not.
Very good.
Through you, Mayor, just interested in asking the presenters, have they been working closely with the Ontario and even the federal government? For instance, one of the big, huge areas of climate protection is to get cars off the roads or transfer to EVs which I've been following very closely. And I think you're going to find that in the next few years is going to grow very rapidly. The Ontario government says that they'll put in charging stations along the 401 corridor, but it's just a little bit early for a municipality like ours to be really jumping in. We'll wait our turn, but do you know if there are plans that you're working on that sort of go to some of the bigger communities like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver?
Scott or Beth?
You want to speak to that?
You go ahead.
Okay.
I have something else to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, For Our Grandchildren itself is actually quite a local group. Not to say that we don't reach outside of the community, but a lot of our efforts have been directed towards the local community, and hence we're speaking to you today. We have other members that are speaking to other councils around the county. We have been in contact with, at the federal level, we've been in contact with Michelle Ferrari from town. We haven't really extended to our own representative there, but it occurred to me as well that we could be reaching out more to higher levels of government as well and asking them what they're doing and getting a little more involved that way.
A lot of what we do, back to the 3 goals: inspire, inform, and motivate. A lot of what we do is really education, through our website, we have a monthly meeting. And so last August or September, we had a gentleman come and speak to our members about EV and just explaining, just like you did, where things are right now in terms of electrical vehicles being taken up, and about charging stations and recyclability of batteries and all of that. So we really do focus on, inform, inspire, and motivate people to climate action, primarily through the monthly meeting, but through our social media as well and our newsletters.
Very good. Ms. Ayat, I saw you pop on there. That means you've got something additional to add.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden, to Scott and Beth. We have social media channels, and if there's anything that you have that we can share, we'd be happy to do that. It helps us to help educate our community. So any help you can give us that way would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, great. I'll email you about that.
Perfect.
Yeah, because I was just going to add to that, I was going to suggest it the other way around as well. Some of the initiatives that you're taking, I'm pretty sure the community would be happy to learn more about those things. We are regular. We have another member that's on the Facebook on a pretty regular basis and posting things from, well, pretty much around the world, but also around Ontario, and particularly around Peterborough area. And if you've got things coming out of Cavan, Monegan that are, community would like to know this, if we had access to some of that material as well to share, that could be a good two-way street to pursue.
Perfect.
Very good. And not to drag COVID into this, but it certainly prevented the on-site visits and being able to explain some of that to community. We do have an anaerobic biodigester within the township, and we've had one for probably close to a decade now. Most people are not aware of it or what it offers, but it's certainly, again, just another example of something within the township that's been a leading force on that aspect as well. Sometimes the discussions, I do sit on the AMO Energy Task Force relative to the generation and the system across the province. And one of the frustrating things I find, and we've just, Deputy Mayor just touched on it, is we're painted with the same brush as Metro Toronto. And as you know, as a resident of Cavan Monegan, we couldn't be anything further than residents of the city of Toronto. And we're very different. We pride ourselves on that. And what works in Toronto doesn't necessarily work in Cavan Monegan either. And I find a lot of the policies, whether it's planning policies or some of the energy policies, they don't necessarily fit within the fabric of our community. And sometimes not enough focus has been put on these other opportunities, such as biodigesters, which people aren't going to complain about the smell in the country. That's why you live here. We have cattle, we have horses, we have livestock. And quite frankly, that's something that fits here. And a biodigester probably doesn't fit in downtown Toronto. So again, a lot of the education component has to us educating those that are not from a rural community, understanding what our needs are and how we can meet the same goals as them, but using a different mechanism.
Right.
So I want to thank you both for presenting before us today, and thank you for opening up those lines of communication. As you can tell, we do have very dedicated staff on this. Bridget specifically that spoke to it, as well as our individual directors that take their decisions, especially at budget time, into consideration when they're making those purchases. And with that, unless there's any further questions, I will ask for a motion to receive that presentation. We've got Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
And Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Beth, Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Moving along, our next presentation, item 7.2, Mike Vetzel, Vice President, and Angela Pinello, Club Administrator, Planning for the Future of Soccer in our community. Welcome, Mike and Angela. I see Mike has entered. There we go. Mike has turned on his camera. We're waiting for Angela. She's entered. Just waiting on. There we go. We have.
Am I here?
You're there, except you're awful pink today.
How's that?
Yeah, there you go. Very good. Excellent. Mike, I didn't see it in your slides, but you've been providing us background on the building code. So are you going to have a couple slides in here on the building code for us today?
No, I apologize for that. I just wanted to sort of chime into the panelists just to.
Always appreciated. Thank you very much. All right, Angela and Mike, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much. Are we able to put up those slides?
That would be Madam Clerk. She will be bringing those up. Very good.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Graham and councillors, and thank you for allowing our delegation to speak to you today. I'd also like to quickly thank Beth and Scott for all their hard work and their real commitment for a greener tomorrow. That was a great presentation a few minutes ago. And also a kind welcome to Councilman Shaw. Welcome aboard, even if there's only single ply. So my name is Mike Vetzel. I'm the Vice President of the Maple Leaf Cavan FC. That's Cavan Monegan's soccer club. I'm joined today with Angela Pinello, our club's administrator. And today we'd like to speak to council regarding the Cavan Monegan Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which was implemented 11 years ago, and the current needs for recreational facilities in the township right now, and really what the future looks like for soccer and other recreational sports programming here in Cavan Monegan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Maple Leaf Cavan FC has been providing inclusive and safe, high quality recreational programming in the Cavan Monegan community for well over 30 years. We have the highest and largest membership base here in the township. We are a strictly volunteer-based board of directors, which really allow us to offer such high quality programming at reasonable pricing to the residents of this township. We do operate year-round with both recreational and competitive divisions, providing budget-friendly community sport programming throughout the year. We're also in good standing with the East Central Ontario Soccer Association, Ontario Soccer, as well as Canada Soccer. Next slide, please. So, coinciding with the continued growth of the township, we've also grown from 2007, having only 416 players to this year, where unfortunately we will need to cap our registration yet again to only 1,000 recreational players and 356 competitive due to the lack of field space. Unfortunately, we are anticipating on having to turn away a few hundred residents yet again this season. Next slide, please. MLCFC is the primary user of the Maple Leaf Park Sports Facility. We partnered with the township 10 years ago and invested close to $200,000 at that time into the facility improvements, and we continue year after year to invest into the facility. We partnered with the township and the Peterborough Timbermen back in 2019 to test the repurpose of the Millbrook Arena as a 3-season field house, which typically generates about $70,000 per year in rental income to the township. With the growth of the club and the limited facilities at Maple Leaf Park, we've also needed to expand to rent fields at places like Fleming College, Crestwood Secondary School, as well as Millbrook Public School. Next slide, please. So here we're going to quickly go through a couple of the points that were made in the Parks and Rec Master Plan 11 years ago. There were quite a few items that have been taken care of, such as these items here, as improving the grass surface and adding the lights to the fields. Next slide, please. Again, back in 2011, the township, skipping ahead. So as mentioned before, the township has successfully explored the potential for an indoor soccer facility. And we believe that we have proven the need for a permanent 3-season home. Even during the pandemic, the facility is rented out to our club 6 days a week and the Timbermen 1 night a week as well. So there's certainly a need for an establishment for indoor sports. Next slide, please. Again, in 2011, the township acknowledged that the field supply did not meet the requirements for soccer, and based on the club's membership size of that time, 7 or 8 additional fields were required. Now, since then, MLCFC has doubled in size, potentially far more, but again, we have to cap the registration due to the current field size. The next slide, please. So the growth of the township and our club have not been matched with the outdoor facilities identified in 2011. Soccer is the most played sport in Canada, with just under 1 million registered participants last year. It's also the fastest growing sport here in North America and is by far the most popular sport worldwide. The master plan speculated, again, 11 years ago, that there would be new field development in the city of Peterborough, which might alleviate the shortages in the field supply. However, the development of new facilities within the city have not helped our club. Growth in the demand for traditional sports and new recreational activities, such as cricket and ultimate frisbee, means that the supply of recreational fields remains. Our club participates annually in city field allocation meetings, and there's yet to be unused capacity opened up to any clubs or sports within the city. Rather, the club retains the fields it was allocated during the Maple Leaf Park renovations 10 years ago. Additionally, for our competitive teams, it's very difficult to meet the Ontario Soccer's standards and provide 1 game night and 2 training sessions per week because of our limited field space. Next slide, please. Sorry. So MLCFC was optimistic a few years ago about the potential to develop a new small-sided fields at the new community center when the landscaping was yet to be completed. Small-sided fields are appropriately sized for younger players. The club and township staff had also discussed the potential for 4 U10 size fields as well as 3 U12 size fields. And these fields are great for playing 7 versus 7 or 9 versus 9, and they're very easily adaptable for younger ages using portable goals and cones. And for the club, these fields would alleviate the great pressure that we have on the playing fields and the parking facilities at Maple Leaf Park. And for the township, the community center would draw people in on the non-ice months to use the facilities at the center when the visitation is low. Maple Leaf Cavan Football Club is hopeful that the township will entertain the development of new small-sided fields as part of its review for future uses of the Cavan Community Center lands. Given the lands available, soccer could be but one future use of this outdoor space. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, our club is ready and interested to partner with the township and any other organization to help us develop new outdoor playing fields for the residents of Cavan Monegan. MLCFC will work with the community to determine the future of the Millbrook Field House and the use of the green space at the new community center. And MLCFC is very interested in working with other organizations to develop indoor playing facilities, such as Crestwood and the Kawartha Downs project. Next slide, sorry. So thank you. And questions?
Very good. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Angela. Questions from members of council? Sorry, I'm just moving my pictures around. If somebody stuck their hand up, I missed it. Okay, back. Was there any questions, sorry, from any members of council? I know I will add to the discussion in, we have a hand. Okay, we got a Councillor Huntley, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, and the growth of soccer is just phenomenal. Like, it's pretty impressive, and I know my kids have gone through the soccer system you guys are hosting, so they've definitely appreciated and have taken full advantage of that. I guess my question is, how dedicated do fields have to be to soccer? Like, what other uses can they have when soccer isn't being played? And I know your presentation kind of alludes to the fact that they're always going to be used all the time, but we know that's not quite the case. But I'm just, how do we maximize the use of this land? Because a soccer field is a big hunk of land, obviously.
The field usage is quite open. Quite frankly, we have different age groups that can utilize different qualities of land. As long as you're not doing a demolition derby or motocross, I think we can certainly find a way to move or relocate younger children who might not necessarily rely on a very, very flat, even surface. There's a lot less injuries and things like that happen with 2 and 3, 4-year-old children. However, we would prefer it to be as flat and as high quality as possible. Luckily, the township has a fantastic person in place, Mr. Chris Allison, who does a phenomenal job of overseeing these facilities. And again, we as a club are also willing to dedicate as much resources as needed with assisting the township to convert additional spaces into appropriate soccer pitches.
Very good. Councillor Huntley?
So you don't see sharing them with anybody, is what it sounds like.
No. We certainly can share. We can share with, like I said, almost anybody. There's not
like field lacrosse.
There's not a lot of, we have a lot of requirements for field spaces for younger children. Mm-hmm. And again, those fields don't need to be perfect. If we're able to have certain fields for even 2 nights a week, that's fantastic, because it's certainly better than what we have right now.
In other words, I think to your point, Councillor Huntley, they might be set up specifically for youth, smaller areas. But number 2, they could be green grass that's large enough for practicing that, where you don't need the full-size nets and lines drawn and everything. It's the open space, and to be converted, I think to your point, is somebody else could come in as soon as they're done and use it for something that's completely different. I don't know, does that help? I think that's where we're going with that discussion. In other words, I think what you'll find is if you build a field and put nets on it and line it, high probability by the sounds of their membership, they'd fill it. It has nothing to do with not wanting to share. Angela, I see your hand up. You've been patient. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. And just to Ryan's question, I mean, there's any sport that needs a field could probably share our fields with us or use the fields. Ultimate Frisbee, we often meet up with the Ultimate Frisbee leagues at Fleming when we're there. Also, baseball does some training, and it's just whatever field sport, really. I wouldn't even be surprised if cricket might also want to come to town, because I do know, in sitting in the Peterborough recreational meetings over the last few years, the last couple by Zoom, cricket is become very popular, and they're always looking for green space and green fields. So flat green space, and we, as Mike Vetzel mentioned, for our youngest teams, we don't need them lined. We don't need huge nets put up. We will just come, we will bring our cones, we will bring our portable little pop-up nets, and we will bring many, many, many little people with us and their parents, and they will just enjoy the game, because that's really what it's all about. Back in the day when we started the U4 program with 3 and 4-year-olds, we would be at Fleming College, and there would be 600 people on one field for 1 hour. It was insane. So I'm not suggesting that we would do that. Obviously, we've learned, that's kind of a good lesson that COVID has taught us, is that we don't need 600 people at one field at one time, but we'd like to, with, of course, more fields, that reduces the footprint on each field for each division. It also will allow our fields at Maple Leaf Park time to rest in between, and it won't be wham bam, like run after the other, because that's also important. It's also important to note that in traveling the fields in the city of Peterborough, and when our competitive teams travel outside into Durham, I will stand by the comment, and I'm very, very proud to say that though they think they're coming to Cavan to play on a cow patch, when they actually arrive, they are surprised and shocked at the beauty that is at Maple Leaf Park and the quality of our fields. So just hats off to the township for taking such amazing care of the fields over the last couple of years. Chris Allison has worked tirelessly last year. He has maintained I know the sprinkler systems have been fixed, and they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous to play on, and we'd like to maintain them and keep them so pristine. So we want to give them a little break in between those 600 players trampling on them. Luckily, the 4-year-olds are pretty light, so they don't do any damage. That's my 2 cents.
Very good. Thank you, Angela. Anything further, Councillor Huntley?
No, I'm good, thank you.
No, I apologize. Deputy Mayor Graham, did you have your hand up?
I did, but just a quick comment. Just wanted to thank both Mike and Angela for the great volunteer work and running such a great organization that affects so many people and youth in the community. It's obviously a great asset, and we're very thankful for all the work that you do.
Very good. Further questions? Councillor Shaw, did I see your hand up at one point? I apologize. I don't want to miss it again. I've already done it once, and the clerk caught me. No. Okay. I guess just to wrap it up, I want to thank you and your organization. Angela, I've worked very closely with you for my duration of being on council for the last 11 and a half years. It's been an absolute pleasure and delight to work with you and your organization. Mike, thank you for stepping up. There was many a times and they weren't sure which volunteers were going to come forward and who they could hand it off to. And clearly they've handed off to a very capable individual, and yourself. You spoke very well today of your organization. You are great advocates for our community. I love seeing you guys go out of our area and beat the pants off those other large city organizations. You represent us well. You make us very proud. And thank you so much. And thank you very much for acknowledging the hard work and dedication of our staff, and specifically Chris Allison, because I know he does a phenomenal job. When he's not at Maple Leaf Park, he's down at CMCC working his magic. COVID's only made his job so much easier, and all the rules and regulations that change hourly, and he's done a fantastic job. So thank you very much for acknowledging his hard work. Thank you again for your organization, everything you bring to our community. And I do look forward to continuing these discussions and moving forward, and hopefully someday get that cap off your registration so you can continue to explode. So thank you. Can I get a motion to receive that presentation? Deputy Mayor Graham and Councillor Shaw. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
And Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Angela and Mike, thank you very much. Keep up the fantastic work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good day.
Next item is 8.1 minutes of the special council budget meeting held January 20th, 2022, and the minutes of the special council budget meeting held January 20th at 6 p.m. Can I get a motion for both of those?
There's a third as well.
What? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Wow. No, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very good. I don't want to confuse the clerk who's still moving people to the outside, and she would have thought I'd said that anyways. But yes, the minutes of the regular council meeting held January 24th as well. We have 3 items on there. We have a mover from Deputy Mayor and a seconder from Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Graham. The first is Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is minutes from committees and boards. We've got 2 separate minutes. A motion to adopt those unless there's any questions. Motion from Deputy Mayor Graham, second. Councillor Shaw, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Moving along to reports, item 10.1, report planning 2022-05, update status report 1066 Sire Line. Mr. Connolly, what's new?
Through your worship, you have before you, through you into council, you have planning report 2022-05 and the recommendation of the council receive report planning 2022-05 update status report 1066 Sire Line for information. So what's new since last we spoke is that this has been a regular update. We have a consultant that is on board, is doing the work. We've been able to refine the scope of work through the Ministry of Transportation. So the definition of the work that had originally been put on the table has been refined. That work continues, and I think based on my discussions with traffic impact study and working with the consultant, we hope to have that report done before the end of February or by the end of February. With that, we would have that, then circulate that to MTO in the county for comments, with the idea, my hope that if that's the case, then we would be able to bring that forward in early part of March. We'd go public notice with the idea that in April 1st, we'd have a public meeting, be able to bring that to council with at least, when we have to statutory have 20 days, bring that to council for a decision with respect to the zoning and the OPA in April. So my hope is that at least those parts can be happened by April. Again, with the notion that the report, the study itself be done by the end of February. So again, optimism. I'm an eternal optimist. I have to be. You got a face like this, you got to be optimistic.
Very good. So if I understood you correctly, the province MTO specifically has agreed to the parameters for the impact of the traffic from the company that doesn't exist yet, and we're not really sure what the traffic's going to be, but they've agreed.
Correct. We have an understanding of the hours of operation, the scope of work in terms of what could be the anticipated, the best case scenario in terms of what could be on the property itself, and then that's been factored into the traffic impact study.
Now, when you say best case scenario, do you mean like best case as in like a convention center or an average, or? No,
the zone, it would be looking at the zoning and what would typically, because we understand through the Hydro-G study, the AIA study, the agricultural impact assessment, as well as the EIS, the environmental impact study, what uses could be sustained there, largely dry. Convention center is not a dry use by any sense. So again, it's with the idea of the zoning, what could be sustained on that property, and the idea of looking at that plus any adjacent development that's going on. And that would be the traffic impact study.
Very good. Any further questions from other members of council? Seeing none. Okay, motion to receive that report. Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Deputy Mayor Graham. Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote. I saw your finger move, Tim.
Okay.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Next report 10.2, report ECD 2022-01, Community Improvement Plan CIP Expansion Project. Ms. Ayat, you've been very busy today. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden, and to members of council. The report before you is ECD 2022-01. There are 2 recommendations. The council provide direction on the preferred option for the implementation of a township-wide community improvement plan program. and that council directs staff to move forward with the development of a draft township-wide CIP program for future council consideration. I'll just remind council that the 3 options for program delivery were evaluated and presented as part of the directions report, but also as part of Diana Kay's report. Option 1 was geographic area. Option 2 was geographic area and sector specific programs. And option 3 was a program-based approach. And that was the approach that was recommended by the consultant and one that is supported by township staff.
Very good. Deputy Mayor Graham, go ahead.
No, I was just make it quick and cheap and cheerful and move forward with option 3 with the stipulation that in year 1 that the 2 zones as identified in the consultant's report would be the exclusive focus of the funding or eligibility, however Cindy wants to phrase it, and to move the report and accept the recommendations with option 3.
Very good. Madam Clerk, you're clear on what that motion is?
Through you, Mayor McFadden to Deputy Mayor Graham. The only clarification I need is the eligibility for year 1 for 2 zones. Should we define what those zones are, or Ms. Hyatt, are you comfortable with it just to say 2 zones?
Urban, fringe, and rural, if you want them, Cindy.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think we probably should
the urban
specify.
fringe and the rural fringe.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Oh.
Very good. So we got that part. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Huntley. Okay, any further discussion on the report? I do want to thank both Councillor Huntley and Deputy Mayor Graham. I know that both of you have put a significant amount of time in it. And Ms. Hyatt, as you're nodding your head yourself as well, for the considerable amount of staff time that you've put into it as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden. I wasn't nodding at my own participation. I was nodding at theirs.
No.
Thank you. I would echo your thanks.
I was getting there. I was just divide and conquer. I was doing council and then I was doing staff. So thank you. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Ms. Hyatt, you're back. Oh, Deputy Mayor Graham.
Sorry, I should have done it before the motion, but it wasn't pertaining to the motion, but just want to also thank all the members of the community that are taking the time to participate in that committee as well, because it is, there's a lot of people that are very busy, but we couldn't do it without their contributions as well.
Very good. Well said. Ms. Hurley, you turned your camera on. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm just waiting for the next report. I'm just eager. That's all.
I thought maybe Ms. Hyatt had dialed a friend and we had her follow up. Okay, very good.
Definitely dial a friend.
Ms. Hyatt, go ahead. Item 10.3, report ECD 2022-02, 2021 Community Improvement Plan Grant Program recipient. Ms. Hyatt.
Thank you, Mayor McFadden and members of council. The report before council is ECD 2022-02 with the following recommendations. That council accept the recommended 2021 Community Improvement Plan grant recipients totaling $28,023 as presented, and that the 2021 CIP grant recipient program be funded through the $25,000 that were approved in the 2021 capital budget, downtown CIP incentives, with the remaining $3,023 funds transferred from the undistributed funds from the 2019 and 2020 community improvement programs.
Very good. Council, any questions or motion? Question, Deputy Mayor Graham, go ahead.
Just a question through you, Mayor. So Bridget, by my rough math, there is still a remainder of approximately $2,000 that we're not allocating to carry forward as a potential contingency for the 2022 CIP. Is that correct?
That is correct. That still remains undistributed.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions? Seeing none, motion then to receive the report and accept the recommendation. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Shaw, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Sorry, I'm already reading ahead to the next report. Ms. Hyatt, thank you very much. You were done for the day. That was well done. Thank you. Next item, 10.4, report CIO 2022-01, update on the community safety and well-being plan. Go
Good
ahead,
afternoon.
Yvette and Carly. There we go.
Yeah, good afternoon, Council. The recommendation before you is that Council receive report CIO 2022-01, update to the community safety plan, well-being plan, and it's just for information. Just want to let you know, if I just bring you to the final second page of the report, this is just to give you an update of the timelines and the delays that we are having. However, we would like to advise Council that we're working right now with, the township is working with Ashfordale, Norwood, and Otonabee South Monegan to try to finalize this report in the spring of 2022 instead of later in the year. And the deputy clerks, as well as the CAOs, will be working together to try to accomplish that.
Very good. Any questions for Ms. Hurley? Seeing none, motion then to receive the report. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Belch, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
and Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you for the update. Next item, report CAO report and capital status. Ms. Hurley?
Again, I'm here, Council, in case you have any questions. It's just giving you an update of where we are in our report status. And just to mention, our capital projects have not been updated because it will not get done until after we approve our budget. But if you have any questions, we're here to answer any of your questions.
Very good. Any questions from members of council? I've got, if council will indulge me, I've got a suggestion for an addition on the outstanding action item. Just writing that down. And that would be that to direct staff to bring back a report on the delegation of authority as it relates to plans of subdivision, official plan amendments. And because I'm not a planner and they're going to know if there's any other items specifically which should come back, but I'm looking at the bigger items, not the smaller stuff. But most specifically, the focus of the report would be on the advantages and disadvantages to the delegation of authority for plans of subdivision and official plan amendments to the lower tier, and specifically Cavan Monegan.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to council, are you looking for a delegation of authority from
The county.
From the county of Peterborough then?
From the county to the township, yes.
Okay.
Having now collectively been through the process multiple times, it would appear from a council perspective on the outside looking in, there appears to be enough duplicity within the process and opportunity to potentially streamline the process, and maybe a report coming back to us outlining the pros and the cons and the abilities of doing that would certainly be helpful for council before any request is made to the county.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Council, I can provide further explanation if there was any required. Just trying to keep the motion on one page. All good? I'll move it. Seconder? Councillor Belch. Any further discussion on that one? Nothing? Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you very much. Anything else specifically on this? If not, I'll entertain a motion to receive the capital status update from Ms. Hurley, Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Shaw. I saw that finger, Councillor Shaw. We're going to count that one.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Next item is council committee verbal reports. We'll just go around the room. Councillor Belch, anything to report?
Just waiting to get confirmation that we'll be meeting, I think, in the third week in February on the Ganaraska committee. And I think that's it for right now.
Very good. Councillor Huntley?
Nothing at this time.
Very good. Councillor Shaw, you get the pass on this one. You're not on any committees at this point, although they do come up periodically, and there might be an opportunity, even though we're within the last year, you never know what you may end up sitting on. Deputy Mayor Graham, go ahead.
Yeah, nothing at this time.
Very good. Update from the library board. So we did have that special meeting to discuss the budget items, and so that's what they just brought forward. So there was nothing further in addition to that. And then with regards to Kawartha Conservation, my first meeting was ironically the AGM, and I was chosen to be the vice chair. So I jumped in feet first, and I find it very interesting already, some of the intricacies and differences, because I did sit on ORCA. So I'd certainly like to have further conversations with both Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley with specifically how each of your organizations work now that I'm going to be on the inside of another organization, because I would consider all three rather not as the, I guess the province deems them high growth areas. We would be considered medium or low relative to the entire watershed. So it'd be interesting to see some of the cross collaboration on some of the initiatives that they do and how they work. So anyways, I look forward to those discussions. I'll take those offline, but it may very well initiate other discussions that we have around this table. So with that, I'd take a motion then to receive those verbal reports. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Shaw.
Whoa.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Motion is approved. There is no general business. No correspondence for information. Moving into correspondence for action. Item 14.1 is a letter from Peterborough Humane Society regarding notice of animal services agreement termination. My recommendation to members of council would be that we refer that to staff to bring back a report and provide us with our options for moving forward. Deputy Mayor Graham, is that reasonable, or did you have something to say?
Yep. Nope. Just move it.
Okay. Move it. Seconder. Councillor Shaw. Any questions, comments before I call for the vote? None. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
And Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is correspondence from the Fire Marshal of Ontario's office, Peterborough County Fire Coordinator. Kudos to our very own Fire Chief Bill Balfour, who has stepped forward to be the Peterborough County Fire Coordinator, but he will need the support of his lower tier township in order to do so. So with that, I would suggest the motion that Council for the Township of Monegan approve and support the appointment of Fire Chief Bill Balfour as the Peterborough County Fire Coordinator. Councillor Shaw, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
I apologize, Mayor McFadden. I did not get your mover. It cut out.
Councillor Belch and Councillor Shaw.
Wonderful. Sorry about that. Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
And Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Very good. Motion is approved. So with that, we will be going into closed session. So we will be shutting down this link. And then our clerk has sent us out an alternative link that you will find in our email. Click on that. We will go into close. I'll give everybody about 5 minutes before we initiate that. And to those that are watching, I will just give you a heads up. We will not be coming back out of close with anything exciting. So do not hang around for the outcome unless you wish to just hear us close the meeting. So with that, I would ask that we shut down this one and we will move into our closed session within the next 5 minutes. Madam Clerk, do you want to recess?
Through Mayor McFadden, we need a resolution to move into closed section as identified. Personnel matters about identify. Yes. Do you want to read
what she said? Yes. Yeah. That the Township of Monegan move into closed session under section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to consider personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Deputy Mayor Graham, Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Graham.
Yes.
And Councillor Shaw.
Yes.
Motion is approved. We will be going into closed session in about